All right. So part of the reason I'm excited, like one is just as a Sabre alumni, I think there's lots of challenges we all faced previously, and that we still face as engineers today. So I think it's just great to reconnect with everyone and talk a little bit about some of the challenges people have and how we're solving them with the Datadog product or just Datadog internally, as well as to hear how other companies are approaching them. The other thing is that I think the observability space is super interesting right now. We've created lots of problems for ourselves as computer scientists, and I think there's lots of really interesting ways to solve those problems right now. And so, the way we collect data, the way we process data, how we can start using ML and AI to surface that data, it just makes it all really, really fascinating. So my intent wasn't to bore you with too many slides. I want to go over and just kind of get aligned on how I think about observability and what my definition is, show you a little bit about Datadog and how we approach that problem, but also have lots of time for Q&A and just general discussion overall. So looking forward to it. So with that, let's get started. So what is observability? Anytime I'm trying to figure out what something is, I go to Google or I go to Wikipedia. And if we go through quickly and look at Wikipedia, essentially the definition is observability is the ability to look at the outputs of a system and understand the current state of that system. Very broad definition. That could be a weather system or some type of environmental system. But as computer scientists, that's primarily either a closed loop system, something like a single server with an application on it, or it might be something as complicated as a function running in Google Cloud Functions that sits on top of perhaps a VM and then on top of hardware that you're just not privy to those other components. Maybe it's relying on infrastructure as a service or a platform as a service, or rather software as a service products to be able to offer the full suite of the business feature that you're trying to build. But again, those things get really, really complicated. And I think the way they've changed, and also just the way we think about monitoring versus observability, it has changed a lot. And to really paint the picture of what observability is today, I think we kind of have to go back a bit. So if we were to look at a traditional deployment, and this could have been in the early 90s, the early 2000s, you had a single physical server. Maybe you're running one application, maybe it's postfix or sendmail or something of that nature. And if we really wanted to understand like how that application was performing and what was happening on it, as a systems engineer, the first thing we do is we look at the resources associated with that application is consuming. So we would start with CPU, memory, and disk. The problem with that, especially if you're an active software developer that's writing that application and running it on that traditional deployment, is that there's only so much insight that you can get from CPU and memory and disk, right? Like you have a zombied process, you don't know why it's zombied, or you don't know why an application started consuming more memory than it had before. And so what's the easiest thing for a software developer to do but to write a string or create a string and write that string to disk, right? So then we start having logging. So now we have the ability to log parts of our application, but one of the challenges there is that we have to think ahead of time. Like what do we want to log? Do we only want to log errors? Is it important that we log when this particular service is accessed or when this website is accessed? What are the things that matter? And a lot of times you can't predict what you're going to need in the future. And so software developers saw that. They said, okay, well, we've got to be able to do more than just logging. And we should, let's start adding libraries that can actually instrument our code, and we can start looking at traces and really understanding like when one function is called or when another function is called. And so then we have application performance monitoring was born. So this is, again, we're still talking 2004 timeframe or sometime around that. And when we talk about, when we talk about APM, it's kind of the first venture into observability in terms of we're collecting a lot of data. We don't know what questions we're going to need to ask in the future, but we start understanding, or we start being able to have tools that have that data for us so that we can answer a lot of different questions when something's not working. And of course, as all this is being developed, we started changing the software architecture underneath our system. So service-oriented architecture was born. We started deploying multiple services, and now it wasn't good enough just to trace like within an individual application, but I need to trace when that application is calling another function over the wire to another service, and be able to relate those things and understand when something's not working as expected. So as all this is happening, so as we're changing both as we're primarily changing our software architecture and starting to change the way we think about monitoring, and again, monitoring with the view that we're trying to make sure something tells us when something is going wrong. Our infrastructure started changing as well. So these systems start blowing up, essentially, right? So now when you had a physical system that you had access to the operating system, well, now maybe you're running on VMs. And those VMs, it's a full-blown operating system sitting on top of another operating system. And you may or may not have access to the hypervisor and the details around that VM because maybe you're running on top of a cloud environment. And then we've shifted to containers. And I think containers is actually one of the most powerful things that we've developed recently in terms of infrastructure, simply because you have this atomic unit that you can deploy and test and easily move through your CI so that you can deploy rapidly, you can test confidently. But the payment we're making there is that we are yet again further abstracted from the physical infrastructure. We're further abstracted from various components of the technology that's being used to actually run our system and run our software. And of course, we get to the point where now, if you're running Google Cloud Functions or any other type of serverless piece, it's kind of the pinnacle as far as like where we are right now. The only thing I have to worry about is what is the business logic that I'm writing. Maybe I'm using another service for OAuth. Maybe I'm using another service for a payment gateway. And so the complexity of the system has just gone from an exponential standpoint in terms of like, what are the related pieces? How do they all work together? How much do I actually have visibility into? And how do I understand when something's working or not working? So the big message here is that our definitions of a system continue to change. They continue to get more complicated. There tends to be parts of it that we have full visibility into, and other parts that we don't, and parts that we control and don't. And there's advantages to that. This all, I may be painting it like it's a bad picture, but the truth is that it allows us to focus on, what are we building for a customer? What's the most important thing to them? And then how do we actually spend our time doing that? But the other side of it, because I primarily focused on the technical pieces of the system and how this complexity is blown up. But there's also lots of other things that come into play, especially with cloud environments. And most of those are around the human side, right? So when we think about our software systems, we can start thinking about our SDLC. We can start thinking about the financial budget to run them. And when it comes to cloud providers, we can now get to the minute, like how much a particular application is costing us. We also no longer have to pick up the phone and call someone and say, I need you to buy 100 servers and make sure you have 100 ports available and space for them to be racked and mounted. Now we can just turn up the volume and all of a sudden you have 40,000 instances. So that means that a lot more people, especially your finance team, wants to be involved. And they want to understand, like, when are you making those decisions to increase those costs, and like, what is the benefit to that, and how to, again, in that really complicated system that I was describing before, how do you relate those pieces? And then with containers, it's much easier to deploy 20 times a day. In that case, if you have a customer that has a problem at time A, how do you determine what was the current alignment of constellations between all your different services to say that, oh, this is the actual bug. I know it because these things were running these versions at this time, and I understand that relationship. So again, these questions the answers to these questions become a lot more complicated as our systems continue to become more and more complicated. And really, what observability and what observability culture is about how do you break down this information? How do you have either a tool or set of tools that allows you to answer a series of questions very quickly, even though you can't predict those questions? It's really about breaking down the barriers between teams and between people so that you're not causing finger pointing, so that you're not having to say, let's roll back that last change. Because now you have more insight and more data to actually make the right choices. So, and some of those things that we talk about that we want to know about in terms of observability is one, availability, right? Is there a constraint in my system that I'm not aware of? Is it a code constraint with the way a particular function's written, or maybe it's in my infrastructure somewhere that I don't realize I'm hitting capacity or I'm about to hit capacity. The other is from a security standpoint. So, you know, am I running a library that has a CVE associated with it and I didn't realize it? Is my business, you know, am I seeing traffic that maybe isn't valid traffic? Maybe it's a DOS attack, right? So how do I understand that? And then also compliance, and maybe not whether or not my business is legal. Hopefully we figured that out ahead of time. But definitely in this global, especially global businesses, you know, like Sabre and like a lot of others that we're talking about, you know, am I compliant with PCI DSS? Am I compliant with Sarbanes-Oxley, SIPA and COPA if you're in the edtech space? There's just so many different regimes that we have to be accountable to. And if you have that extremely dynamic system that I described before, it's really difficult to make sure, like, what is the current state, and is the state I'm in still compliant with where I should be? And then all these things I've talked to so far are just they're the pieces that are required to even offer the service, like to even start to play the game. But now you have to make sure that, am I actually performant? My customers getting what they need out of the service that I built? Is it timely? Is the data accurate? Like, how do I make sure I understand those things once I've confirmed all these others? And then lastly, kind of alluding to what I said before, what about cost? Is my cost of goods sold associated with a given service? Does it make sense? Does it make sense for my business? Am I investing in the right places? Is it okay that I turn the volume up to 20 and all of a sudden, you know, I have 40,000 instances? Like, being able to answer that very quickly is very important. And again, all this is, you know, is the hope is that we do this in a way that is proactive, that we're able to collect this data or have a tool that allows us to understand this data in a way where we can answer these questions without knowing what those questions are going to be in the future, right? So we don't have to go back in time and actually make sure I'm collecting data or I have access to certain data to answer those things, with the end goal of breaking down those barriers and really making sure that teams are working collaboratively and they're focused on the end goal, which is like, how do we build a business and how we build a service that makes sense for our customers and we're serving them correctly. So that's a very quick run through of kind of, you know, how I think about of observability and what the definition is. Also, just how it's changed, like as we've gone from monitoring something to tell us that we're aware that something's broken, to being able to have tools to really be able to observe and understand our systems and see the output. I want to talk a little bit about how Datadog, specifically our product, how we tackle observability and some of the things that we do. So if you're not familiar with us, we're a SaaS-based platform for observability, monitoring, and security. Security is a fairly recent offering for us, but if you look at the signals and data that we process, it makes perfect sense that we should be able to add that into our observability suite for our customers. We were built for the cloud, but we're not just for the cloud. You can monitor multiple cloud presence across multiple cloud providers, but you can also monitor things on-prem. We have a really lightweight open source agent that you can deploy on physical infrastructure or also in your cloud environments, where we can then pull that data in and give you more visibility into your systems overall. The big focus that we've had from the beginning is that concept of DevOps. When I started talking about this presentation in the beginning, I specifically pulled out like the systems engineer, the application developer. Like, those things have changed. Like, for the most part, we're all practicing DevOps at this point, and a lot of us are practicing DevSecOps too. So how do you build, or like our goal is how to build a product that gives all the same data, but from different perspectives. So if I have a security specialization, or if I have an operations specialization, I'm able to quickly collaborate and see this information with my peer, and then be able to work collaboratively. Yeah, can't say it. We're together to go through and address the particular issue in hand, right? So we do that through monitor, through metrics, traces, and logs, but through a lot of other signals that we pull in and together into a single dashboard. And specifically how we do that, we have 450 different integrations today, plus 50 additional sources where we pull data from. We pull your logs, traces, metrics, activity, like for real user monitoring, for instance, as well as we ingest all the tags from all your cloud providers and pull from cloud APIs to pull all that data to a central location that then we can give you a bunch of platform services to work with. So Watchdog, for instance, is our ML technology that allows us to do predictions on where a particular metric is going, or can show where there's association between two metrics, right? So you can see that, hey, this had a spike the same time this had a drop, or both of these had spikes at the same time. Where we try to highlight that information so you can quickly get to root cause, reducing your MTTR, reducing your mean time to detect. We give a number of collaboration tools, so everything from time boards to dashboards that anyone can build, and you can share securely externally, or you can share just within your company. So you can pull all that data together in a meaningful way. And then we give you a bunch of monitoring or a bunch of alerting and what we call monitors that you can then feed in to trigger and work with our integrations, so you can go through and page people and get the right people involved as you need to. We do that through a number of different products, and we do that in a single pane of glass across teams. But I really think the best way to talk about Travelocity about Datadog is to do a quick demo. So first off, I'm gonna ask again that everyone can see my screen. All good?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So so this is in our demo environment. So this is actually based on an application that we wrote. It's a Ruby on Rails app and a Python application that's meant to mimic an e-commerce site. We call it Shopist. So it's actually pulling in real data based on some synthetics that we've built and written to generate some of this data. So in this case, I'm just looking at a dashboard. So this dashboard is a combination of a whole bunch of different metrics. Anyone can go through and create a dashboard. Dashboards are searchable. And we make it really easy through being able to go through and do this all through drag and drop widget. So any type of data that we're pulling in, you can basically go through and put on a dashboard like this. In this particular case, I put the SLO first. So service level objective, what we're trying to actually hit as a team. What are our service level indicators that drive this? So that's usually like our monitors or alerts. You can union those, so bring different ones together and be able to offer those or be able to use those as a way to measure what your SLOs are. We also have our standard red metrics. So requests per second, your error rate, and then the duration of each request. In this particular case, my error rate seems to be quite higher than what I would expect. Like we're in the orange zone. You can also see we're pulling in revenue here. So this is just through one of our integrations. It could be Salesforce or another ERP where we're pulling in those business metrics, so you can look at that. And again, here's a business dashboard, and like the key thing here that maybe the user looking at this would be, well, this checkout time seems to be pretty high, 44 seconds, and the value of the number of failed carts also seems high. So something seems odd, and you see we've pulled in specific technical data that then imply some of these business KPIs, as well as we're using synthetics over here on the left for you to see like the response time of different key endpoints. We also have APM data here, and the thing that I want to call your attention to here is this is actually what we call a time board. So you can see as I move my cursor along on one graph, there's a line that's drawn across all the other graphs. That line correlates, so humans tend to be really good at spotting patterns. So if we go through and we're like, oh, the spike in the bottom right, I can see what happened on all the other graphs around that same time. So over here, it looks like we started seeing a particular version change, a number of errors based on that version, right? So you see the version change here. Then we also allow you to pull in your infrastructure metrics. In this case, we can look at disk space consumption. Maybe that's been something that we've ran into before. And here we're forecasting like what our usage is going to be, so we have some idea when we need to add additional disk space. And then we're also pulling in log data. So this is raw log information, but then we can also do log to metrics which allows you just to create straight like time series data out of those logs, whether it be a regex pattern that you've matched against, or some defaults that we have built in, so you can then use that data to do alerting, etc. But for the user building this or using this, obviously the first thing you have to do is actually get to a place where I can get the data into Datadog. So to do that, I would go to our integrations page. Like I said, we have 450 integrations right now. And we have some really common ones. A lot of teams are using PagerDuty, for instance, to do on-call. So quickly can integrate with PagerDuty. We can have rules around what metrics you want to page on, or what combination metrics you want to page on. A lot of companies are also using ServiceNow for like problem and incident management. So we have an integration there as well. It allows you to create tickets. We also have an incident management product that allows you to go through and track and manage your incidents during it, create postmortems after, but you can also feed that data into ServiceNow, or we can pull data from ServiceNow as it makes sense. And of course, the timely thing for some of you, at least, is the ability to integrate with Google. We have it set up where you can actually go through and integrate with any of Google's services individually, or you can just do it once. It takes about 5 minutes to put in your credentials, and then build to quickly start ingesting data from various Google APIs. So, if you're running something on-prem, or also for a lot of our customers that are going through and running in the cloud, they also want to run an agent because they're running something specific, on top of their system that they want to use an integration for. So we have a number of different versions of the agent for just about every operating system you can imagine. We also have a lot of configuration management tools that like the templates, so you can go through and use Chef, Puppet, Ansible, or SaltStack to quickly install the agent. Or if you're using Kubernetes, we have a Helm chart as well as a Kubernetes daemon set, so you can quickly deploy it to your Kubernetes environment. So again, our job here is how do we make it as easy as possible for you to get data into Datadog so you can actually start making use of it. So now once this customer is trying to understand what's going on with their checkouts, they're like, well, maybe we'll start with the infrastructure first, so we'll jump to our host map. So this is our host map, which basically will show just a high-level view, because again, like going back to that discussion around observability and like the complexity of these systems, the idea is like, how do you start at a high level and then be able to drill down? So here we show all your infrastructure hosts. In this case, I'm doing this by CPU utilization. So the color coding is down here. You can see where I have high CPU, but this isn't particularly helpful. So I can go through and I can use tags, or again, like some of these tags are default tags we put on from Datadog. Others are default ones that we pull in from like GCP or Azure or AWS. But here I just went and grouped by cloud provider, so you can see what's running in GCP versus AWS and Azure. And I can further do this by availability zone, which gives me just a quick bird's eye view of kind of what's happening in my environment. If we look at one of these hosts that are running a little hot in GCP, we can quickly see like what's running on the host. So these are all the integrations that have been enabled. These are applications we've actually detected. So we use eBPF in part of our and a lot of our products actually. But one of the things it allows us to do is go through and detect what processes are running and be able to give suggestions on what integrations you may want to integrate with or you may want to enable. In addition, I can quickly go to networks, processes, or containers from here. You can see where we're pulling in our GCP tags as well as like the unique data tags over here, Datadog tags over here. And you can have just a quick view of like, let's just jump into networks, for instance. And you can see like network traffic that's coming in and out of this particular system. So these are all exactly what's happening right now, real time. I can even go through and look at a map or DNS. But maybe I decide this is not an infrastructure problem. Maybe it is an application problem. So from there, we would go to our APM product and service map. And, the thing I want to highlight here is that it's really easy when I'm in any of these particular products to pivot to another and see something from another perspective. So I'll specifically highlight that here. So here with APM, so you have your application instrumented with a library. We're actually in beta right now for something called Universal Service Monitoring, which again relies on eBPF, but allows us to inspect traffic on the wire. so that you don't have to actually instrument your code with a library, and you can still get visualizations like this, and you can get more information about what's happening amongst your different applications based on different protocols. But here we can see the web store is kind of central to what's happening here. It's, you know, everything's coming in here and then going out to these different pieces. I can quickly go here and inspect. But I can also go and look at all the logs that's associated with this application and the server or instance this is running on. But I can just go here to inspect very quickly. And what it'll do is it'll centralize or center the web store in my view, and it shows all the traffic that's currently coming into the web store and from what services, as well as where this traffic is going. And I can see, like, for instance, this is a function that's being called, so it's some type of serverless function. I can see different web-based APIs, and then I can go to something like inventories, and I can actually see the individual traces. So here is just a list of all the traces to the inventories API that's available. I can see that I'm getting a 500 on these, and from here I can go to a flame graph. I can see the full view of the flame graph, as well as like where the particular error is happening, and quickly go and look at the error, or I can look at all the logs associated with this particular application, or again, like, you know, go to see what processes are running live on the system currently. So that's just a real quick overview of you know, what Datadog is, and like how we try to pull all the parts of observability together overall. But yeah. With that, I did want to just open it up to questions and a little bit of discussion about maybe some of the things that you'd like to know about. So,
all right, yeah, thanks, David, for running through that. There's one question I like to, before we get into while people are thinking about putting things into the chat. So you can, if you put it in the regular chat will find it. There is a Q&A chat as well. That lets us take them in sections. So as you're thinking through what you might want to ask David about observability, or anything specific about how Datadog does something, I'll ask you kind of a starter question. It's not technology focused, not Datadog focused. It's kind of a career question, and I like to ask all of our speakers what they might tell themselves if they could go back in time. What career advice would you give younger David? Whatever you know now, what would you tell yourself if you go back in your early career and give you some pointers?
That's a good question. I would have lots of advice for younger David. So I think the one thing that I've definitely started to realize, and as you're managing teams and everything, you start thinking about, what's motivation, what people get excited about, and it actually like ties directly into kind of the one of the first slides you showed, Jim, which is just how am I growing, like how am I learning? I think that a lot of people come to me like, oh, I'm stuck in this dead end job, not at Datadog, thankfully, and I'm really bored, or like I'm not happy, I want to go do something else. Like, how do I do that? And the advice I always have for them is, sit down and think about like what you can learn where you're at, no matter what role you have, what company you're in. There's always something to learn, and sometimes it can be like how not to do something, and that's okay too. But I do think it's useful to be thoughtful about it and like put a plan around it and put effort into it. Just because it's that I don't think any career trajectory is like a straight path. It's always meandering, and many times that tends to be the most interesting too, right? So I think the biggest thing would be like be purposeful in like what you want to learn. Sit down and think about it. Don't just take your current role for face value. Like try to think about like what can I learn while I'm here. Even if I am planning on doing something else. So
all right, yeah. So to go back, like if I could sum it up, always be learning, even if you're in, say, your beginner job. There's always something to learn. Obviously, there's lots of stuff to learn, but what can you do in that current job? To pick something up that you didn't know about before, to continue to add value where you're at, and maybe that'll. Yeah, it's definitely not a straight line. For anybody, any of you that are working in cloud, when you started, not quite a cloud existed. So if you had a plan to go to cloud, you might have been Werner Vogels or somebody like that that helped bring cloud to reality. But most of the rest of us had no idea of that pathway that we would follow. Yeah, thanks for that, David. Let me. Do you want me to keep the recording going for the question and answer section?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all right. If we go off track a little bit, then we can stop. But
all right, let me pull the questions over here. I'll read them. I'll read them from the chat. Go to the Q&A section. All right, looks like there's a few here, and I'll just read them from the top, and then we'll mark them as answered, and I'll read them out just so people know where we're at. So one's from Anthony Rossini. I assume yes, but is database monitoring a part of the Datadog platform?
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually offer two ways to monitor your database. So one, we have integration for a large number of databases. So you can just search our integrations page, and most likely your database should be there. Depending on the database, we also now have the ability to do database monitoring from a tracing standpoint. So you can actually trace all the way from your application to like a particular SQL call. And then we try to pair like various database performance metrics with that particular call, so you can quickly diagnose like, hey, is this actually something wrong with the database itself, like how it's configured, how it's performing, or is this like the query needs to be optimized, or whatever the case is. So we try to pair that data together as quickly and clearly as possible. Okay,
so not only do you guys have a lot of plugins for individual databases themselves, but if you if you want to do distributed tracing, there's a way to do it all the way from the client down to the individual SQL call, if you have things set up properly, so that you can tie poor user performance to maybe a slow SQL query or something like that.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, that's awesome stuff right there. Shabir Mohammed had a question, and it's comparing Datadog to Google's Cloud Operations Suite, formerly Stackdriver, plus whatever else they've added to it over the years. So what additional benefits do you see that Datadog has versus that cloud native, I don't want to throw out cloud native, but Google's Cloud Operations Suite?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we definitely look at Stackdriver a lot, and we know that like Google and as well as Azure and AWS provide like good out of the box like starter observability products. But I think what's unique about Datadog is our ability to pull a whole bunch of data together in a single view. So the things that we do that like GCP can't is the ability to pull that data both from our agent, but also from all of GCP's APIs, and then pull it together in a single, like enrich it and pull it together in a single view. There's a lot of other components just because of our integrations where we're able to get a lot more insight into the applications or the frameworks you're looking at and you're monitoring, and be able to provide that, and again, in a single pane of glass. I think it's especially powerful for companies also like doing that transition, just because if you're sitting on-prem and you need to see like what's the network traffic that's coming from the switch all the way into my cloud environment, like those are the types of things that we also do really well.
All right, awesome. All right, moving on to the next one. One's from Owen from Sabre. Do you allow custom data feeds? Maybe so we here at Sabre, we still do have some mainframe. We have tons of stuff that's not on mainframe. We still have some mainframe. yeah, do you have any custom feeds that could be sent into Datadog through event or some other mechanism?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so first time I'm somewhat familiar with Z9s, and there's definitely lots of so one, all of we provide our own APIs and our own ability to our own intakes to take logs as events or metrics, even custom metrics. You don't have to use the Datadog agent. So if you have a log stream or something, as long as it follows a standard format, you can easily go through and pipe that into Datadog, so then you have access to that same data. Then you have all the tools that Datadog provides, right? So you have all the ML capabilities, but also like the log metrics and things of that nature. We do have a number of integrations. Like I know this doesn't apply to mainframe specifically, but like we're even supporting like some AS400 and System-I systems for customers, and we definitely have customers with mainframes as well. So it's not a unique use case. We're like our view is we want to give you a full end-to-end view of your environment, regardless of how what technology you're using or where you're running it. So,
okay. All right. There's a couple questions from Kenny Kahn, from formerly a Sabre, now with the great Lowe's. Lowe's gets all my weekend money, so. Kenny, keeping you in business. Data emitted from OpenTelemetry. It's a relatively new thing in the distributed tracing world, a new standard, a new open standard. So how does Datadog deal with visualizations with data emitted from OpenTelemetry? And then a follow-up, how does it differ from an open tool like skywalking? And I haven't heard of skywalking. Maybe you have, but yeah, we'll let you take it away.
Yeah. Actually, I haven't heard of skywalking, so I'd be curious to hear more about that. But I am very familiar with OTel. So we are a major contributor to OTel, and OLTP actually has lots of advantages of the protocol in order to build more integrations faster, in order to create common ways for us to collect data and also send data. So I think there's a few things. One, specifically in APM, if you look at our tracing libraries, they tend to be a lot more performant than OTel right now, and yet they still comply with the standard. If you look at across our infrastructure monitoring, it's really about the integrations. It's just the ability to run our agent and then quickly get data from a MySQL server you're running locally, or let's say you're running your own Kubernetes orchestrator. Like we have plugins to actually pull directly from Kubernetes APIs and give you specific information, and all that's for the most part out of the box. Now OTel may catch up with us, and again we're making big contributions there to what's happening in the OTel project. But it's also one of those things where it is a committee that's working together to actually bring forward the collector. And it's just not moving at quite the pace we want it to. So we think it'll get there eventually, but for now, like you're going to get a lot more benefits in terms of performance, in terms of features and things of that nature through the Datadog agent and through our current libraries. So.
Okay, that's yeah, those things where you're working as a collective to move things forward should get us into a good place eventually, but maybe you may be lagging behind the benefits of being on Datadog specifically, because it sounds like you guys are pushing ahead faster than the community.
Yeah, I mean that's a good way to summarize it. So.
Yep. Next question's from Scott Davidson. Yeah, we did look at in the demo at the engineering type items. Any type of use for business users in Datadog?
Yeah, I mean the way we built the dashboard specifically, it's pretty like, first off, we are definitely focused on engineers. Like one other tidbit is that we we use Datadog to monitor Datadog, so we are all users of Datadog on a regular basis, and definitely that's where a lot of the input and and part of our product thought process comes from. But we have lots of companies, especially for business intelligence. I mean, you get your business intelligence data from the logs that you write, the metrics that you collect. And so we've made it really easy to create dashboards so business users can use it. And many times what we see is customers, they may have a business-specific dashboard, but a lot of times they will have a business-specific dashboard like right next to their particular technology metrics, right? Like how performance is going, or how what issues they're having, so they can allocate costs. That said, like something that we launched in beta last year was our cloud cost management product, which, if you're familiar with companies like Cloud Health and of that nature, like our view though is still more on the engineering or engineering leader focus. So thinking about how can I show you key metrics around the services you're running in regards to their cost. But also for like the whole FinOps crowd, right? Because that's a whole practice that companies are now taking up, just because as they run the cloud, it's a big consideration. So really focusing on that persona, trying to build tools around that view. But what we found too is still a lot of our visualization even works for them. It's more just out of the box. We're creating very specific dashboards, very specific metrics that they can use that is more applicable to the business user. So.
And one of the and I might have missed it in your answer. A lot of companies that are trying to move to a site reliability engineering model. One of the businessy type things that people are interested in keeping track of are kind of the service level objectives, and SLOs, SLIs, SLAs, that kind of thing. Do you have any specific SLO widgets or anything like that in Datadog that people can build an SRE/businessy type dashboard that's watching those key SLO metrics?
We do. We actually have an SLO and SLI product, and really what it's about is it kind of walks you through how you think about, okay, I have these monitors that are monitoring these particular metrics, or I'm extracting like this particular data from traces. How do I think about setting thresholds for those things? And then how do those things roll up to the relationship of like that one application, roll up to these 5 other services that all depend on each other? And how does that roll up to all your SLIs to drive your SLOs? So that is, definitely something that we offer. Again, something we use internally as well. So a big part of like how we think about running our business.
All right, and I'll jump over Wojtek's question for a second. Go to DeWalker's. So along with SLOs, SLIs. Some of the things that go into SLOs are understanding the CUJ, which is a critical user journey. So how do you define a CUJ for Datadog, and you do the monitor of Datadog with Datadog? Is there any special CUJs? It's maybe a little recursive joke, but
no. I mean, dog fooding is obviously something we talk about all the time. So one, we are deployed across multiple cloud providers in multiple regions, and so like one thing that we're able to do from the standpoint of monitoring Datadog is have that insight, and we look at it through RUM for one case, so real user monitoring, like within the user's browser. We're looking at it through a series of synthetics tests, so starting at the edge and starting outside and looking in, but then having each region actually monitor each other, right?
Okay.
And then from there, you say critical user journeys. We don't actually think of it like that. We do think of some of our core systems that we know always have to be up and available. We have key customers that depend on us to make sure they're available. So there is definitely a high level of expectations on the performance and reliability of key parts of our application that ingest data, and making sure that we're continuing to keep the trust of our customers. So I think when we talk about what we're going to monitor and what's the combination of things, again, we start from the outside, we go in, we have a number of things like dial tones, for instance, in our services, where we send fake data and we actually check that data along every service. to make sure that our services are performing like we need to. Yeah, so I'm not sure I'm answering your question around critical user journey specifically, but you know, I mean, it's the root of like how we think of it is like we identify what our core services are, similar to how I've done it at previous companies, and then we go through and we have a lot of synthetic data that goes through, both synthetic and real user data, that we go to monitor to see like how things are performing, and we have lots of circuit breakers and other safety mechanisms that allow us to make sure that we have options if something isn't going as we expect. So.
Well, that's yeah. I don't know if it necessarily answers Walker's question. He'll maybe ask some follow-up questions in the chat, or if he sticks around for the after. I already forgot what it's called. Virtual networking. If he sticks around for the virtual networking part. On one question from Wojtek, and it gets into you know, something technical. So there's eBPF, you know, which I think is there to help with service meshing, so you don't have to have a sidecar per container, but you can have, you know, just a sidecar or the eBPF handling the communication for all the containers on the host. I think I'm remembering that right. But do you know if there's a relationship between eBPF and Datadog?
I can definitely talk. Yeah, I can definitely talk about eBPF. So BPF is Berkeley Packet Filter. For those of you that remembers TCP dump or have used it recently, even. And basically eBPF was an extension of that allowed us to do more kernel hooks into like more hooks into kernel space, right? And actually be able to write code within their code that would capture information from the kernel in a safe way that has a very low tax from a performance standpoint. This is one of the areas that I find super fascinating right now in the observability space. It's extremely powerful. So a lot of our, especially the kind of the feature that you're referring to, Jim, is definitely like part of the eBPF. Like if you look at Selenium and like some of the other like service meshes, like they're taking advantage of some of those of some of that technology, I believe. But we definitely use it to how we monitor containers, how we monitor processes, and now like in the security space too, because you're able to see like particular system calls, within your kernel and capture that information and then compare it against what's actually allowed or what's expected and things of that nature. So we do a lot of eBPF development. A lot of that sits within my team just because it sits within the agent itself. But we partner with teams all across Datadog. That's one of the things I mentioned before about universal service monitoring. And like what's really exciting about that is that we can actually, by hooking into the kernel, we can go through and see, oh, this is actually it's this process, which is running this code that's making this call to the network using this protocol. And we can start collecting that data and collecting it from multiple points and actually start stitching together like an APM service mesh or service map rather, without having to instrument your code, by going through and adding libraries to every single application. So yeah, no like clear relationship except we use it. We're pretty passionate about it and we're pretty excited by it. Yeah, hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and that the ability to get those service mappings without, say, you have 1,000 or tens of thousands of microservices, and maybe they're not microservices running on a service mesh. Maybe they're just maybe just have thousands of services, and if you want to get the service mapping, being able to grab it straight from the system rather than having developers go and instrument their code, send it out. I think that sounds like it would be a really powerful shortcut to provide insights for like a vast ecosystem.
Especially if if you have an application that, and this happens, with a lot of customers that have legacy apps that they haven't had the time to instrument, or it's just like something either you acquired or whatever the case is. Like this is a really powerful way for you to start getting at least some insight, right? Going back to like, how do I understand how that system is operating? It's super exciting. It's some really neat technology. lots of great blogs on it, easy to Google and like dig into it if you're ever interested. So.
All right, so I'm looking through the Q&A. Looks like the Q&A, we've drained the Q&A section, and you're almost up to an hour, which is about where we usually get to. So what we'll do now, thank you, David, for joining us. If you have time, we'll take a 5-minute break, and this is for anybody that's still on. We'll take a 5-minute break, at which point we'll come back. I'll make everybody a host. I'll make everybody a host, so you can turn on your camera and your microphone. We'll have a little virtual networking. Obviously, we won't record that section. But what I'll do, I'll bring up a 5-minute timer. Go take a quick break, grab some coffee or whatever, and we'll see you back in 5 minutes. But David, thank you for taking the time. Super interesting. Glad you could join us.
No, thanks so much for inviting me. Like, it was definitely a pleasure, and I'm definitely gonna stick around. Love to talk to some people and hear other questions.